On today's Domain Sherpa review, we have 3 professional brokers on the panel. Some interesting concepts are discussed, including the ideal time to introduce the idea of a payment plan to a buyer, some benefits of a payment plan, but to buyer, to seller, and to broker that you may never have considered before. They also discuss an anti-disparagement clause in domain acquisition contracts that's really fascinating and I think would be great for the industry. Listen to the show. There are lots of little gems here and there and a lot of fun the whole way along. Enjoy. Hey, Sherpa Network, thanks for joining us. I'm Tess Diaz, executive producer of DomainSherpa.com, and today we're doing the Domain Sherpa Review. This is a show where we get into the minds of successful domain name investors using real examples so we can learn strategies and tactics to become better investors ourselves. We will have 3 segments to today's review. First, we'll discuss what the Sherpas recently bought or sold, with the other Sherpas guessing the prices. Next, we'll discuss in value an investor-submitted domain name portfolio. And finally, we'll preview some domains going to auction soon at NameJet.com and whether the Sherpas think they're a good investment opportunity for you. Today, we are delighted to have 1 OG Sherpa and 2 brand new Sherpas. Drew Rosener, Media Options. Hello, how you doing?
Doing great.
Good
Great
to have you
back after a couple weeks absence.
Yeah, we missed you and your familiar face. Bill Sweetman, you are a very familiar face. We are totally shocked that this is your first time on the Sherpa Review panel. So Bill is founder of Name Ninja Domain Buyer Brokerage. Bill, you are such a great host and friendly person that you frequently do quite a bit at the different domain conferences, right?
That's right. I have been one of the moderators of NamesCon. I think this past January was my 6th year doing that.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, you know everybody, and you belong here on this panel because not only are you great at moderating, you have so much knowledge from your years with your buyer brokerage firm as well. And Brian Harbin, welcome for the first time on Domain Sherpa. Brian is broker at gritbrokerage.com. Brian, I love the connotation of grit brokerage and the shout out to the South. You're joining us from Florida today.
That's right, Jacksonville, Florida. So definitely appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, delighted to have you. Brian, we've really appreciated getting to know you over the last few years. How long have you been brokering domain names?
Yeah, so it would have been the summer of 2014. So coming up on 5 years. Yep.
Okay, yeah, and you've really made some waves, made a good splash here in the industry, and it is very good to have you stepping up where you belong with the Sherpas. So welcome to each of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we thought we'd take it easy on you and have Drew go first. When we jump in here, the first segment of our show is What's New Sherpas? So we're going to discuss one purchase or sale that you've made over the past few weeks. The purpose of this is to discuss the market a little bit, to have some fun with each other, and also for our listeners, the Sherpa Network, they get to learn a little bit of how different brokers see domains, domain name values, and the market right now a little differently and why. So, Drew, tell us a name that you have purchased or sold in the last few weeks, but don't tell us the price.
So I'm going to switch it up. I almost 100% of the time talk about domain. Actually, I think the last time I was on, I talked about a sale as well. We just sold a name. It was a name that we owned. And so I feel comfortable talking about it. There was no NDA involved. And I think it was a good price for the name. And it was a very quick turnaround. So that's why I'm going to talk about that instead of a purchase.
Good info, except the hint. No,
there's no hint.
But they're not new to this. They don't need any hints, Drew.
I'm a black box in a variable. It doesn't hint anything to anybody. Immutable.com. IMMUTABLE. Immutable. Immutable.
Sounds like
Definition
a
is
spelling bee.
basically you can't, kind of. You can't, can't be manipulated, edited. It's written in stone.
All right.
Well, I'll leave it at that.
Okay. And this was a sale. So Media Options owned domain that
Correct.
you sold.
Correct.
Okay. So Bill and Brian, duke it out. Who wants to guess first what he sold it for?
I'll take a shot at that. So my thinking is, oneword.com, lots of syllables, very obscure word. In fact, thank you for explaining what the word meant. I'm sure it probably has a Latin origin, but kind of unusual and has a bold nature to it. Now, I also have to think of the fact that it came from your portfolio, Drew. So, you negotiate hard, but you also, you're not unrealistic. And so you will sell your names. I've had the privilege of buying at least a couple of names from you for clients. So my sense there is you would have agreed to sell that for $75,000.
Okay, good guess. And Bill, thank you. That's exactly what we're looking for. Taking us through the thought process, because, I know when you in particular, but when someone is buying a domain, they come and say, well, I kind of want it, it's got to be one word, or it's got to be easy to spell, or I want it to connote this strength of character. And that's how domains are frequently acquired for branding purposes, right?
Yes, it usually my clients are often startups or serial entrepreneurs, and they typically they have a particular brand name in mind, which can be a problem because sometimes the .com can never be acquired.
Yeah,
and we'll talk a bit more about that later, but they've already usually put a lot of thought into what they think the brand should be, even if it's not possible to get the .com domain.
And then you can extrapolate from that. Okay, this feeling, this length, this what ability in different languages, whatever it may be. All right, now Brian, you have little. You're coming in with Bill already having said so much, and it's okay if you have a similar ideas or something different. What are your thoughts about Immutable.com?
Well, it's definitely a great name. I mean, it's relevant, with people don't want to be censored with what they say. So I think it's timely. My guess would be, he said it's relatively a quick turnaround from when he bought it to when he sold it. So my guess would be probably paid, maybe high 4 figures, maybe just into 5 figures. But I would think he might be willing to take a little bit less. I've heard Drew say before, focus on the margins, and just getting some of your money back. So I think he might have taken about half of what Bill said. So my guess would be somewhere around 30K, maybe high 20s, low 30s.
Okay. All right. Fair guess. And, names like this, it's difficult to have a real comparable sales set. Like, the domain market is not quite like the real estate market, So Drew,
I'm generally super, ever more so, because I used to support the idea of comparable sales, and as a measure of value, and I used to even include comparable sales in, we have like a premium domain evaluation that we offer. I reluctantly offer it, to be honest, because it takes a long time to actually do it. It's like a 9-page report that it's, I think it's $1,400 or $1,250 or something. And, even though that might sound high to have your domain appraised, it's usually, it's usually being done for like a high stakes deal, or it's being done because of a bankruptcy or an audit, or, and so it's a very in-depth report that requires a lot of time to do it. And I used to include a whole page talking about, an in-depth report of comparable sales. And I've eliminated that because I truly, truly believe that these are not commodities. You cannot compare one domain sale to another. And all of the information and data that you can extrapolate from a comparable domain sale is completely 100% subjective. There's very little objective data that can be taken from one domain sale and applied to another. The only thing that's objective is if you're talking about the same domain buyer or the same domain seller, you can extrapolate whether or not they undersold, oversold. If there's any insight into how long that negotiation protracted, you can extrapolate some information there. But otherwise, I am ever more firmly against comparable domain sales. Just wanted to make that point.
And your point about the buyer and the type of buyer that's buying the domain or any domain, that is so key to the to the perceived value and what, for how much and if it will actually turn into a transaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right. Good point. Yeah. All right, Drew.
So, all right, drum roll. So, you're both wrong. I sold it for $100,000 even.
Wow.
And it was I had priced it at $150, and it was a several multi-week negotiation. And it was interesting because I was actually quite rude to the buyer because they just kept coming back at like $3,000, $5,000, $7,000. And it was like, look, you're not moving the needle here. And I actually started raising the price. I was like, look, honestly, you're wasting my time. Now I'm going to start charging you for my time. And because I just didn't like the way that the guy was negotiating. And so he very intelligently introduced me to his partner or boss, or I don't know who it is. And was like, look, I'm going to let him take it from here. And then that guy was very straightforward, and we very quickly, came to a deal. And, things started moving in the right direction. And so that goes to show you that who's involved is really essential, not just to the price outcome, but to the success of the deal. Because egos and personalities, my own and the buyers, I'm working on that, can very often get in the way of a successful transaction. When I refer to my own ego, I am very cognizant of the fact that when I'm negotiating a transaction for a domain that we actually own, my ego can oftentimes become a hurdle. It can get in the way. It can disrupt the flow of the deal. It can be susceptible to my mood and other factors that are going on in my day in life.
Well, and you're not really a motivated seller either.
Yeah, that doesn't help. That doesn't help. It gives me a little bit of, arrogance. However, when I'm selling or buying for a third party, it's amazing how that just isn't there. And so more and more, I'm letting others negotiate the sale of names that we own. But it depends on the circumstances.
Well, that really...
I actually think, as a domain broker, I think that's a pretty relevant point, which I think is what you were going to say. It's like, you're better off. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how experienced you are. If you own the asset or you are the one who wants to buy the asset, there are emotions and intangibles involved that can and most likely will at some point disrupt the deal.
And that's what I was going to chime in on is you really speak to the importance of having a trusted, somewhat neutral intermediary, whether you're on the buy or sell side, because I typically represent buyers, and sometimes their thoughts, their assumptions about the domain owner, the way they even talk negatively about the domain owners because they don't understand. Little known fact, I have all my clients are under contract, and I have a clause in my buyer brokerage contract with my buyer clients that they cannot disparage the domain owner. They cannot call them a cyber squatter later, because I don't, it's my reputation. I'm the one interacting with the domain owner, and I don't want the legitimate domain owners to be abused or, maligned by my buyer clients. So I make my clients agree, don't slam these legitimate domain owners and domainers.
That's a great point, especially when they issue their press release or something, that you're looking at the development of the whole industry, not just today's deal. Good for you.
Hey, that's great. It really is a great point. There was a deal recently, not my deal. I just remember reading about it. I think it was somebody that put out the story on Reddit, or it was like a good domain acquisition that maybe happened a year or two ago. I forget who wrote about it or what company it was. It was a good name though. And in the story, it was a great story, play by play of how the whole thing went down over a period of years. But he was very disparaging towards the domain owner, even though as somebody in the industry, as I'm reading, I'm like, he didn't do anything wrong. The guy was totally cool. In fact, I think he was calm, cool, and collected with the whole negotiation. But here's this guy calling him a cyber squatter or a, domain squatter or whatever the term he used was. So I like that. I like that clause.
Yeah, that's really fabulous. And I know over the years, there's been so much talk about maybe someday having a domain brokerage, certification or a some kind of association. And I don't know if that'll ever come to be, but if it is, I think that would be a great thing for every certified broker to include, don't you? That would be, I think that'd make a difference. Okay. So,
hey, Tess, one thing I was going to mention on that is, it's interesting how people come into a negotiation and with a very specific technique. Like there's an attorney that was looking to buy a domain and came in with a $7,500 offer. And because we took 2 hours to get back to him, he says, well, my offer is now decreased to $5,000. And so right off the bat, he's telling us the type of negotiation tactics that he wants to use. And I think sometimes as brokers, it's great because we help kind of insulate those responses because, clearly, a seller's going to get on defense mode and then there's just going to be no collaboration at that point. So I think it's very important in those type of situations to have a broker that can come in and be like, all right, calm down over here. We'll get to your response. It might take a little bit of time, but hey, let's, but yeah, it's funny how people come in with these very specific techniques of like, you never know who's on the other side of that email. You just have to be very delicate at times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes the biggest egos have the biggest pocketbooks. It's not always about.
More often than not, in fact.
And that's why sometimes the deal happens through a co-brokerage relationship, because I've worked with Brian on acquiring domains. He was the seller broker. I was the buyer broker. And I'm pretty sure, Drew, we've done that. I know I've bought names directly from you, but I think we've done the co-brokerage thing as well. So, hey, it whatever gets the job done.
Yeah. And I know, Brian too, I know there've been a lot of discussions on co-brokerage there. I think that's a big deal to know that brokers in this industry talk to each other, work together, especially if someone is watching this show who is looking into acquiring a domain or trying to figure out if they need a broker. There's a lot to be learned through this process. Okay, so Immutable.com, fantastic sale. That is a really good price for it.
I'm gonna just provide a little bit more detail, and I'm sorry to hog the microphone here, but as I think George Bush said to, who was it? George Bush Sr. It was in one of the debates, and he said, I think it was George. No, I don't remember who it was, but it's a great quote. He said, I paid for this microphone. Thank you very much. We paid $20,000 for a package that included Immutable.com, Immutability.com, and Immutable.net. And which I thought at the time was a good deal. I didn't think that it was really a steal, but I was like, immutable is a very applicable term to blockchain. It's something that's used specifically to identify probably the greatest advantage of a blockchain, which is it's it can't be manipulated. There's no way to change historical transactions. It's a permanent ledger that cannot be manipulated in any way, good or bad. And so that is called, that is immutability. And if something is immutable, cannot be manipulated. And so I liked it because I just thought it was it's really a defining characteristic of a very fast growing industry, even if it's tough to spell. And I was never familiar with the term until I got interested in blockchain. And so, I think the multiple syllables, difficulty to spell, brought it down from being, probably a 250 to 350 name. And I think we got pretty much all of it at $100,000. I think.
And did you sell it to a crypto related company?
I believe so. I couldn't find a lot about these guys, but the limited stuff I could find tied them to a cryptocurrency related company.
Yeah, congrats on that deal. I'm happy that I was wrong and then you sold it above what I thought you might have sold it for. So that's a great, unless of course I was the buyer, then
Well, and I think, it's not really about being, quote unquote wrong about a price so much as thinking through what it might be used for, it's the process is more interesting. And the guessing just adds a little fun. So you were right, I think, both of you about the processes. And Brian, what you said about censorship really jumped out to me. I hadn't thought about it in that end, but that's something too, blockchain is such a new industry and so much, it's going to be around a long time, but who knows who the major players are going to all turn out to be. But there's always, censorship is going to be around forever, unfortunately. And I think, with privacy, all the laws surrounding these different areas of freedom of speech, that's a great thing when you acquire a domain, that there's some liquidity to sell it at some point. So very good point. Bill, you're up next. What's a domain you recently bought or sold?
So I mentioned it, as you know, pretty well every transaction I do as a buyer broker is under some kind of confidentiality clause. So I can't, and that's one actually the most frustrating parts of my job is that I don't get to talk about the interesting transactions that get to happen. So, but what I am going to share with you is the deal it's in escrow right now. It's a oneword.com. And I want to give you a little bit of the history on how that deal came to be, but I can't tell you the name. I can tell you the price though. So, but the backstory is, I worked with a client in Europe starting about 2 years ago, and they were doing a global expansion. So they wanted to migrate off their country code name to get the .com. And so I worked on that project, and that's not the transaction that's in escrow right now, but that was the first project. And that was a wild and crazy project. But they came to me about 3 or 4 months ago. They're doing kind of a spin-off venture. And they came to me and said, hey, we're doing a spin-off venture, and there's this oneword.com that we're interested in. Can you look into it and let us know if it might be acquired or acquirable? So I took a quick look at the name, and it's like, okay, really good oneword.com, owned by a tech entrepreneur. He's owned it, 10, 15 years. And I said to the client, I really don't think it's not listed for sale anywhere. Like this guy, he doesn't need the money. He's going to be very reluctant to sell it. He's using it for email. But, if you want me to take a shot, I will. And the clients, and I sort of said, I estimate you're looking at somewhere between 500,000 to over $1 million based on who owns the name, the quality of the name, et cetera, et cetera. So they engaged me to try to acquire that name, and I made contact with the owner. We had a really good dialogue. He's very professional. Long story short, I was right. He wouldn't sell it for less than $1 million plus. And I conveyed that back to my client, and my client was like, well, we're going to have to find a different name. So I said to the client, well, let me know kind of about the project you're working on. Maybe I can suggest some names to you that you can get for within your budget. Their budget was, maybe up to $500,000. And I knew they wanted a oneword.com. So they went off. They didn't take me up on my offer. They went off. And the clock is ticking here, right? Because they want to launch their new project, I think this fall. So they came back to me with this invented word name that was really terrible. And because they sort of said, hey, do you think this is acquirable? So I kind of looked at that invented word name, and it's like, yeah, actually, you could acquire this name, but I really don't think you should acquire this name. And I explained why. It was just like it failed the radio test. It was just a horrible name. And also, I said, you're going to overpay for this name because based on who owns it, you're probably going to have to pay $50,000 to $100,000 for it. And it's the kind of name that if it was on Brand Bucket, it'd be like $5,000. So it's kind of like, I just don't like this name. You overpay. Thankfully, my client didn't mind me being candid like that. And so I said, here, look, you guys are on a timeline. Let's do this the right way. How about you tell me what the nature of your new project is? I'll take a look at what good oneword.coms are currently on the market. I'll curate a list of recommended potential brand names for you. And then you take a look at that curated list, and maybe you'll see something on there that'll pop for you. And then we can just go and get it, because the name should be able to be acquired for within your budget within a couple of weeks. So they actually said yes to that. And I have to tell you, that happens so few times. Like, that's how it should always be done, but it rarely ever happens. So they agreed. I went off. I looked at 300 names, and I looked at names that were represented by Media Options and were represented by other brokers and brokerages I know. These are all names that, I knew were on the market. And I curated it down to 32 recommendations for the client. These were names that I thought might be suitable for their new venture. I sent them the list, and they got back to me within a few days, and they particularly liked one of the names. So I was like, great. They actually were making progress here. So then I took a look at that name, and this is where it was really interesting. In the back of my mind, that name seemed familiar to me. And the reason it seemed familiar is it was owned, I knew a guy in Toronto, and he owned that domain name about 15, 20 years ago. So the first thing I did was, I was curious to say, okay, which broker represented it? And when I looked a bit closer, I realized, oh, okay, that guy in Toronto, he doesn't own the domain anymore. And I actually saw that what happened is he had sold it to a domainer. That domainer, I think, had tried to sell it through Media Options about 5 or 6 years ago. So Media Options was representing it 5 or 6 years ago. It was then acquired by somebody else, and maybe even acquired by somebody else. And now it was being repped by another brokerage, not Media Options. So I spoke to the new brokers, and we worked out a co-brokerage arrangement, and the deal's in escrow now. And so my client, I think the asking price was, it was north of 600. And we finally agreed on a quick closure, and my client's paying $450,000 for it. And then all the brokers are getting compensated, and the client's getting this amazing domain name. But I will say that what was interesting is I suspect the guy in Toronto sold it for less than $100,000, because when Media Options was representing the newer owner, it was listed for between $100,000 and $150,000. So it's interesting how it changed hands over the years and has now potentially found a forever home by an end user at $450,000. And I still think my client got a good deal, because I think it's a wonderful name, and I'm very excited. I'm going to be so excited to see them put it to use.
That's a great example of how companies look at acquisitions and how domain brokers look at acquisitions, because the branding process for the history of time has had nothing to do with availability beyond there being no IP conflict. And it's just not like that anymore. And interesting to see as you go through the process and see it going from home to home, recognizing, that's going to affect your acquisition strategy, the offers you make, what you're guessing the pricing would be. It takes a lot of research to do all that.
Yeah, and I did, just to be clear, I did that research, the historical research, just as a bit of due diligence, not because I wanted to contact the current owner, because my whole philosophy is I knew about that domain name because it was provided to me by one of a reputable brokerage firm. So there was no way in hell I was going to go direct to the domain owner. I would go through the seller brokerage because that's how I came to find out about the name. And so it becomes a win-win for everybody. And I actually don't know who the owner is, and I may find out one day. I don't think it's you, Drew, though. I don't think you ever owned this name, unfortunately.
Now that's a really neat story. And I think I'm seeing a little theme here develop as we talk of the importance of a broker, again, because what you researched, some of it is just historic knowledge. You remember from, did you say 20 years ago? How many?
Yeah, this guy, I think had hand registered it because he had a technology firm, and he used it for that. And it's just weird because I remember meeting him at this early web, it was a Toronto Web Girls event, but it was open to men. And I remember the first time I met him, and it's like, I got his business card, I guess. I was like, wow, you own that name? I was like, how'd you get that? So it's just too bad I didn't get to buy it from him, because that would have been really cool.
Yeah, that's really neat. But there's historic knowledge. There's the different tools that we use to research who owns domains. There are also the I don't know whose phone is ringing, but then on top of that, there are the probably emails that you're researching from newsletters that other brokers have listed over the years. There's a ton that goes into it. So good for you. That's an excellent deal. Brian, you're up. What's a name you recently bought or sold?
All right, good deal. So yeah, I've got two. I'll kind of let you guys choose. So one of them is a oneword.com. So I don't know if you guys want me to share kind of some of what they've done, or I've got a oneword.co domain. So I guess you guys have a preference.
Which one's got more shock and awe? This is showbiz, man. We need shock and awe.
All right, shock and awe. Yeah. Well, all right. Let's just do the .co then.
All right.
So yeah, there's one that we just sold. A lady had reached out maybe a month and a half ago, and came in. So anyways, the domain is declare.co. Declare.co.
Declare.co. All right. Kind of powerful there. All right. Make a guess. Bill, Drew, what do you think?
So normally I probably would have said, this is a sale, right?
Yeah.
You sold it.
Yeah, it's an escrow.
Okay. So normally I'd probably be like in the $5,000 to $9,000 range, I'd probably say. But because I've just said, shock and awe, and he picked the .co, I'm going to overshoot that a bit. I'm going to say $18,000.
Okay. All right. Good poker face, Brian. Bill, what do you think declare.co sold for?
So I'm glad we're talking about a oneword.co, because a lot of my clients are startups. A lot of times they want a oneword.com, and then I give them the reality check about what that would actually cost them. And they often will then bring up the topic of a .co. And I like that they bring up the topic of a .co, because .cos are very popular with startups, and it's a great extension. So I bought a lot of .cos, including some through Brian. So I would say on that one, I like that one. I would say using the shock and awe thing, I'm going to go the other way. I think maybe that sold for 65,000. Normally I would say more between 40 and 50, but I'll say 65 is my shock and awe guess on that one.
Wow. All right. That's a high guess, Bill.
Yeah, you set the watermark high.
Yeah. So Brian, you can spit out the price right away, or you can make them work for it. We want to hear a little bit about the negotiation process. So you pick. Tell us what you want.
Yeah, for sure. And, it wasn't really a shock and awe type deal. It's actually kind of more, and we've got, a couple other .co domains in escrow right now in the same price range. So, but yeah, there was one other reason I wanted to share this. So it's in escrow right now. It's a payment plan, right? So it's at $22,500, so $22,500. And I thought, what was interesting about it is the fact that, she'd come in with best and final all cash, because a lot of buyers come in with the mentality of all cash. And I think she was somewhere around that 10 to 11, 12,000 mark. And, I think it's just important to introduce at that point. I don't think introducing payment plan is a smart thing to do too early on, because then it kind of muddies the water. Gets people too distracted. But, once she was at that best and final, then we introduced the payment plan, was able to stretch it out over 18 months. And what I like about payment plans is, first of all, obviously the sale price is going to be higher. Second of all, it's consistent cash flow for the seller, the broker. It helps the buyer spread it out. Yeah, they can start using the domain right off the bat. And the other thing I like about it as a broker is it keeps me in contact now with these buyers for the next 18 months. And I can't tell you, when I do a one-shot deal with buyers or sellers, you don't really have a chance to kind of build that relationship with them. But, as a matter of fact, they were emailing this morning, they're trying to get the redirect and the server names. And so when I'm automatic and responsive, it's just now I'm almost kind of representing both people, if that makes sense. So that's what I really like about him. And the oneword.com was the same thing. His top offer was half of what we were able to get out of the payment plan, and been able to develop a great relationship with them as well. So I think the two things with that would just be, don't introduce it too early, but then second of all, think about the long-term benefits to all parties involved, and having a consistent cash flow for the sellers. Of course it's risk-free, because if the buyers stop paying, they keep the payments and the domain. So I think it's just a win-win for everybody. You don't get credit with escrow.com for the top 10 at the end of the year for payment plans, but hey, it's a win-win in all other situations.
Brian,
I'm not sure if that's true. I think you get credit for payments made. I think you get credit for payments made. I'm not sure, actually. I don't know. They account for it. I know it's accounted for. I'm just not sure when it's accounted for. I don't know, when the final payment gets made, if that's when they account for it, or if it's
that's probably when it is
accounted for it as, payments made. Because sometimes these things have big deposits up front. I don't know. That's a good question.
I like that Drew goes straight to the competition aspect. Bill, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to ask Brian, well, congrats on the sale. Also wanted to find out who brought up the topic of payment plan, buyer or you as the broker?
Yeah, usually the buyers rarely, if ever, bring that up. So it's something that I'll introduce. And having researched who she was a little bit, I knew that she was well-versed and educated, buyer from that standpoint. So that's always helpful to know in terms of how much information they're going to need to justify the price that we're asking. So
nice.
I find that a lot of my clients aren't even aware that might be a possibility, that a payment plan might be a possibility with a domain owner. So it's, I certainly encourage domainers that if they're comfortable with offering that kind of model to, at some point during negotiations, let the buyer know it's a possibility, because sometimes it's what takes you across the finish line.
And Brian, I'm wondering, you said right after she offered best and final. I'm betting that's not always your mark of when to introduce it. What factors do you consider when deciding the timing for proposing a payment plan?
Well, first of all, and this is probably similar to Bill and Drew. I mean, in a perfect situation, I want to talk to them on the phone, right? I want to, especially when I give that first price, I really don't even want to quote a price unless I can get them on the phone. And you're still going to have people that just refuse. And then the next best scenario is once I have spoken to them on the phone, texting is always the best, just because you're getting immediate responses. They're getting it. And it's just going to make for a more efficient process all the way through if you guys are texting and you've already spoken on the phone and have that relationship. So I think, first of all, if I can get them on the phone, kind of feel them out, see where they're at in terms of price, and then it allows me to be able to ask some follow-up questions to kind of test the waters to see if it's even going to make a difference. Because for some people, they don't even care. So you don't want to spend 3 or 4 emails talking about a payment plan when you can tell by the tone of their voice whether or not that's even important or not. So I think it's just really being able to talk to them on the phone, feel them out, what's their tone, how quick are they, are they warm and friendly? You just kind of need to know a little bit more of a complete picture as far as the person that you're talking to and the situation.
That's really insightful, Brian. Thank you. That's a good point. Yeah. Hey, thank you guys.
I just quick comment. So 100% spot on. I actually do think that is the ideal point in time to bring up a payment plan. So when somebody comes in and says, look, best and final offer, they've already sort of wrapped their mind around this acquisition emotionally. And if you come back in a very polite and clear with minimal words and just say, super grateful for your offer. It's a strong offer. Unfortunately, it's a bit shy of, where we need to be. How about if if you pay that much up front and, whatever X amount per month and the balloon at the end, or there's a million different ways to structure these things, but some variation of what they've offered with an extension that should be easily manageable relative to the size of the company, the growth of the company, whatever you know about the company, right? Formatting it with some personalization to what you believe the needs of this company will be, make them a very fair, polite counteroffer that kind of ignores the fact that they've made you this best and final offer, and just say, here's another way that we can approach this. What I've found is that has a really interesting effect. Most of these people are adamantly against the idea of paying for something and not controlling it. I think there's a shift, in that mentality, but for the moment, it still is the majority are adamantly against the idea of a lease or payment plan. And so what that does is it like reframes it for them. And it's like they're looking at it as all cash or this type of payment plan. They've emotionally committed to the deal. And so I would say probably in more than half of the times where we've got a serious best and final offer, not a tire kicking offer, but a serious best and final offer. I would say more than half of the time when I come back and I propose a payment plan, it immediately triggers them to say, you know what, I'll take you for the cash price. And that's it. Boom. All right, let's just do it. And actually, that's exactly what happened with the Immutable sale. Is I came back and said, guys, look, no problem. This industry is going to grow, made a bunch of different points. Why don't you put, I don't remember the numbers exactly were, but it was half of whatever they had offered me. I said, put that down, pay $2,000 a month, and 24 months from now, pay off the balance. And by that point, this thing will pay for itself. And it was at that point that he came back immediately and was just like, what's the best cash price? And whatever, the details don't matter. But the point is the timing. I think that exactly when they tell you this is my best and final offer, that's exactly the right time to say, well, here's some other alternatives to bridge the gap. And just because of their own biases, they're going to jump back to, okay, what's the cash price?
That's very, very good point there, Drew. Thank you. Good story too with Immutable. You were holding out on us. For the record, Ronald Reagan said, I am paying for this microphone.
And who did he say it to? Ford? Was it Ford?
Well, I think did he run against George Bush? is what it sounds like. I have no clue. But he
I
said
remember
it. There's
Yeah,
a
might
whole
have been.
story about it. But he said it to editor John Breen, but he called him Mr. Green. So
Okay. But it was in a presidential debate.
it
in
was,
a-
yeah. It's kind of funny. Like, I read about it a little bit, and I'm like, what? What kind of crazy was happening in 1980? All right. Congrats to each of you on your sales. You definitely have some negotiation tactics to learn from the Gipper, because if you read up on the history of this, he was negotiating and awfully good at it. Let's take a moment here. We'll just introduce you. Thank you to each of our sponsors for the show, and then we'll come back for the next segment. First, serious about online trading? Secure your funds, keep your merchandise safe, and use a company that keeps the buyer and seller protected the whole way through. That's escrow.com. Payments you can trust. So let's jump in to the domain portfolio review. We take user-submitted domain name portfolios and provide honest and constructive feedback to the owners so they can cut their losses, continue to hold them long-term, or figure out a sales strategy going forward. Today, we have domains from Ken G, not Kenny G, just Ken. And I believe I only sent you .coms. We have about 25 of them. Brian, you are up first. What jumps out at you as either if you see kind of, a general strategy that you're extrapolating from this list that you want to talk about, or particular domains that you would say, sell this now, hold this long term, don't even renew this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think there was about 25 domains on the list, and so actually not some bad domains. I think some of the ones that I liked were decapitalized.com. What I like about that is a couple different terms, going from uppercase to lowercase, but also to me, it sounded like a great name for a book, right? So, how like a government can ruin a country through decapitalization, like decapitalize. So it's, I would price that maybe in the high fours. But I think that's a pretty solid domain. I really liked diluters.com, lots of practical applications. I mean, if you're a super hip chemistry teacher, but anyways, I think there's a lot of, I'm not exactly that familiar with diluters, but I'm sure with, including water and how that could be something that could be of use in the future with diluters. But I think I would consider that a 5-figure domain name. And then Courtesy Discount, I think is a great domain, positive name for a discount coupon club, good 2word.com that's, common terms. And I would price that in high fours, maybe low fives. But I think with the domains he's got, there wasn't anything I hated. I did like how there was a couple of domains that he had bought ones that were kind of similar to each other. The ones on the list I didn't like, I think this is his list, Domainizers. Is this the same list? Domainizers? Okay,
Yes.
just because
Yes.
that's hard to pronounce, doesn't really make sense. And then I didn't like conflicts resolutions. The two plurals is very distracting. I think that's only going to be valuable if you own the other combinations like conflict resolution, conflict resolutions, conflicts resolution. So unless you had those other ones, then that by itself is really not worth anything in my opinion. But that was kind of my assessment of the list.
Thanks. Yeah, great walkthrough. Good point on the conflicts in conflicts resolutions. That it makes a difference if you have a package or just an individual name on a confusing name like that. Hey, Drew, what jumps out at you?
Okay, so I wasn't quite as happy with this list. I think actually the only name I like on the list is autohealing.com. I just think, that has probably a very high probability of becoming a thing in medicine. And so, could sell. But even so, it's like a little too descriptive. It's not going to be a company name. So I don't love it, but I wouldn't let it expire.
Really? I would not have guessed that would be the one name that would jump out at you. What do you think of?
I kind of like decapitalize.com after Brian talked about it, but it didn't immediately come on my radar.
Okay.
When I saw auto healing, I actually I saw it as automotive. It
Like
took me a while
car
to
repair?
see it as medical.
Yeah.
I liked it more as medical.
Yeah. Although there's probably a broader audience for car repair. But then it would be like auto healer or auto doctor, I don't know. So the other one, it's okay, is luckiestnumber.com. I mean, I don't know what the commercial application is. I mean, it's just, there's enough popular culture around the term that it's probably got some value, but it's limited. There's not going to be a lot of love there. I would say, he probably has to rethink his strategy here. I just come back to exactly the same thing I tell most of the people that come with a portfolio like this. You've clearly got some strategy in your mind, and you're trying to execute on that. That I'm hoping that these are all hand registrations, and that you haven't paid much in auctions or through other channels. Even with the limited number of 25 domains here, we're still talking about a few $100s a year carrying costs, and that adds up. Because you ain't selling these names in less than 10 years, right? And that's if you sell 2 names. And 2 names from this portfolio doesn't cover 10 years of carrying costs, because you're not going to sell these names. On the best day, when all the stars align, you might get $2,500 for one of these names. And so that's, somewhere along the line of 5 to 7 years of renewals. And so at 10 years, even if you broke even, you're losing your ass because of the opportunity cost. So you need to probably keep 1 or 2, maybe 3 at most names on this list. And I would take the savings from not renewing them, and I would go out and I'd buy 1 domain, the best name, spend a week watching the markets, watching these auctions, and the best name that, after you've done that for 3 to 5 days, if there's a name that pops out, you go, wow, that's better than most of the names I saw selling for $200 to $500, go for it, right? If there's several people bidding for that name, if there's additional interest, if there's anything that you can gauge to make you feel more confident that you're not the only one that thinks this name has value, because by definition, if the name is being hand registered by you, you're the only person who thinks it has value, all right? Like, let's be clear. If you are hand registering a domain name, you are the only person on the planet who thinks that domain has value, because if anybody else thought it had value, they would have bought it. There are exceptions to that rule, but it is an exception and not the rule. So let these things go. Take the $300, $400, $500 in savings and buy 1 name, and then go out, spend the time, hustle, contact 100 people, and if you can't sell that name, then quit. Go into a different business. Because if you've done the homework to pick the 1 name that you're going to buy for $200 to $500, and then you contact 100 companies that would be qualified buyers in your mind for that domain, and nobody wants it for the price that you offer, which the price you should offer should be, let's say, no more than 5x what you paid, just to try and get, try and make the sale 3x, 5x. And if you can't do that, then you're just not suited for this. And it's just, I'm not suited to be an NBA basketball player. That's fine. I'm not that's, it's just not what I'm made for. So
Drew cries about it at night, though. Sometimes. Well, and there are different sales strategies. I think you gave, fabulous advice until the end.
I think it's just an important way to gauge whether or not you should continue in this path, right? Because believe me, the reason we have this show is because I want to expand the pie. I want more people to be in the domain business. I want more people to benefit from what I think is the greatest asset class on earth. But it's not made for everybody, just like everything else. And so if you can't go through that simple exercise, now, this isn't the way to necessarily build, you know, your business in the domain industry, but it's a great gut check for when you're starting out. Because if you've got 25 names like this, and you might have more than that, right? You're heading down the wrong path. Even if it's just a hobby, you're wasting your time and you're wasting your money. And so,
but you can learn a lot from the feedback you get when you try to sell something like cycling vlog. You'll see that somebody else, instead of paying you $200 for cycling vlog, they'll just get cycle vlog or cycling blog, or, you know, and when you get that feedback, it can help inform your next.
I think, you know, Brian is a perfect example. Okay. I listened to Brian's interview with Andrew Alleman on Domain Name Wire the other day. And, you know, you mentioned, Brian, correct me if I'm talking out of turn here, but you mentioned that you had studied Domain Name Sherpa, right? Back when it was owned by Michael Seiger. And you listened to everybody that came on the show, except me. And you studied, you just obsessively studied the market to understand what's a domain worth. And then you went out and you hustled. You did exactly what I'm telling these people to do. And there is no better way. You can listen to me and everybody else until you're blue in the face, but until you go out and you try and sell a domain that you own or somebody else owns, and you get told to go, you know, fuck yourself, until you get told, you know, you're an idiot, until you get the door slammed in your face a million times, until you, but what's critical with that is when somebody slams the door in your face, just politely ask why. Don't even try to give them a hard sell. Don't try and convince them. Just accept that they're not your buyer, because you're just wasting your time if you keep, you know. But ask them why, because there is no better way to understand domain value and understand the mindset of the people you're trying to sell to than to ask them why they're saying no. Because if it was obvious to you they should own the domain, there's obviously a disconnect. And until you can bridge that gap and formulate a response in your mind and of how to overcome it with the next person, you're not moving ahead. You're not truly grasping domains. And it's actually something that I didn't even really formulate until I listened to that interview. The biggest problem in our industry, as I see it, as somebody who's receiving lists from people every single day, what seems like the same list from a million different people, it's crap, okay? And some of these people are really intelligent people. I had a guy email yesterday. Guy has a PhD in, I don't remember what, I think it was psychology. And, you know, he wrote this very thoughtful email and about why he thought this domain name was going to be the groundbreaking sale of the year. And I wrote back to him, look, honestly, I don't think it's more than a 4-figure name. And I would never spend my time to try and sell it because, you know, even at that price, it's a high flyer. But he's talking about 7 figures. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, what's the disconnect here? This is a highly intelligent person. Where's the disconnect? And it truly comes down to the majority of domain investors simply have never tried to sell a domain. They come to brokers, they come to marketplaces, they watch what other people are doing, but they've never gone out and spoken to a buyer and been told why their framework is wrong. And there's no way to truly refine that framework, a mental framework of understanding value, understanding what actually drives a domain sale, until the people who do the buying tell you.
That's a good point. And you don't have to become a broker, but go through that as an exercise in your process.
Mm-hmm. But man, look, Brian is the example. Like, you followed exactly what I'm saying. You're one of the 1 in 20,000 who actually did the work, who actually took what, not just me, but what all of the experts that you've listened to said. And we all say the same thing. Like, you know, you have to study, and you have to, you know, understand what drives value and understand what drives sales. So anyways.
Yeah.
I'll shut
And
up.
hey, one thing to piggyback what you said, Drew, is one thing that really helped me a lot in the beginning. Because I think to really be effective in this industry, understanding empathy in terms of putting yourself in the buyer's shoes, like, okay, what are they thinking when they're inquiring about this domain? You know, what's their angle? So one of the things that really helped me when I first got in this industry is when I told people I was involved in domains. It's funny because everybody has a domain story, right? Anybody you talk to, oh yeah, I tried to buy this domain one time, or somebody inquired about this. So one of the things that helped me was I had friends that I would help them with their domain purchasing process for their company, and help to understand what's the thought process, and would help them acquire domains. And the other thing that's important too, each domain acquisition usually should involve 3 or 4 other domain acquisitions, whether it's like a misspelling or another extension, to go ahead and capture it before you start to build a brand on it. All of a sudden, somebody wants to sell you a slight variation, like one of the domains that I bought actually on NameJet for my own personal self was successfulthinking.com. But I went ahead and bought successful with 2 L's because I knew people would probably misspell it, and it was available on GoDaddy. So again, each time you're buying something for your brand, it usually is going to involve a couple different ones. But I think for me, that was super helpful, talking to my business owner friends and helping them with their process, and them walking through it with them, and then of course them referring me to anybody else that they know. But that was super helpful too, just like you said, to understand that buying process.
Yeah, very cool.
Cool.
Bill, you have anything you want to add for Ken here?
Oh, absolutely. And I love the tough love that Drew delivered there. So I'll go actually a little bit easier on Ken than I was planning to. At a high level, my read on Ken's portfolio is that we're a lot of kind of wannabe names. And what I mean by that is names that, they were almost a good name, but because the syntax was wrong, or it was plural instead of singular, or it's just, poor choice of word. Most of the names were not, were not names I would even recommend renewing. But I'll talk about a few that I thought were going in the right direction. There were none that I loved, unfortunately, but 3 that kind of I thought were pretty good. Blingmasters.com, cute little 2-word brandable name, maybe for automotive aftermarket or something like that. That's the kind of name you could see selling for $1,500 or $1,800 with a buy it now price on it. Cashdetector.com kind of sounded like a product or service. Once again, under 2,000, buy it now, GoDaddy premium listings, just get it out the door. And then a kind of one-word.com, choppable.com, sort of kind of interesting, because it is technically a one word. Maybe a startup, might be interested in that. I think it's a stretch, but, kind of interesting. 3 that kind of, it's interesting. We all identified a number of names, some of the same names we had major issues with. So that conflictsresolutions.com, the double plurals just kills it. I also flagged cycling vlog, because vlog, to me, that's a term from like 10 years ago. Like, does anybody have a vlog anymore? I mean, it's just like, And then global.
Hold on. I just watched an interview with who's the most famous vlogger in the world? The guy, Casey Neistat. And he just did an interview with Jason from angel.co.
Yeah.
And they were all about blog and blogging and bloggers. And I sold we own vlog.com, blog.com. And I sold it like 2 years ago for a good price, like a couple $100,000. And
I think you got out at the right time. But
yeah, I agree. But it still seems to be alive and well, because I was thinking to myself, maybe I sold too early,
No. And then the last one that I was not a fan of was globallyshipped.com, because to me the tense was wrong on that.
Yeah.
I think Ken, from my perspective, Ken should not renew or ditch like 80% at least of his portfolio and just really tighten up his name selection, because these were not good enough to really have a sustainable resale business with.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Yeah, and I think, very, very close, but not quite. So he's headed in the right direction. Just time to rethink a couple things. And Ken, thank you so much for submitting your domains for the entire Sherpa network to learn here, because a lot of folks have portfolios very similar to this. So let's keep in touch, see if you do make some changes, and let us know how it went. Before we jump into the domains going to auction soon, let me tell you about our sponsors who support us in our educational mission.
FD was built by domain investors to increase your inquiries, sales, and profit. Forget spreadsheets and archived emails. Manage your entire investment portfolio in one place using a secure and completely confidential platform. Learn more at ft.com. That's EFTY, ft.com.
So we'll move on now to our marketplace list. This segment is sponsored by NameJet. We're reviewing domains heading to auction soon. I do love to hear when our Sherpa Network actually does say that they pause the video right now, read the domains, think it out, and kind of guess so that they can then go through the process and then hear what you guys think. Bill, you're up first. What are your thoughts on this list? What jumps out to you? Oh, sorry, for transparency, Sherpas, do you own or are you brokering any of the domains on the list?
Nope.
No.
Okay. So Bill, what jumps out to you here on this?
So, and just a question for you, I identify some names that did stand out and why I liked them. Am I also suggesting what a domainer might want to pay for them for future resale, or?
If you're comfortable, yes.
Sure. Okay. So I liked quite a few. First one was adventuregear.com. It sounded like a brand. It's kind of generic, but it's kind of generic brandable. So that's something where maybe I could see that selling for, anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000. So maybe invest up to $500 to pick it up, but you'd have to fix price that one if you're going to sell it, is my recommendation. Aquastream.com sounds like a brand again. I would actually check trademarks on that, just to make sure it's actually not a trademark infringing name.
It sounds like a brand because you're thinking of SodaStream.
Could be. That's true. Yeah, I've got a SodaStream downstairs. So yeah, you might have a point there. Maybe that one, maybe go to spend up to $200, $250 on that. Hope to sell it for mid to high four figures. Bodyarts.com, kind of interesting. Also sounds like a brand, maybe in the tattoo space. Same kind of pricing recommendation on that one. I won't talk. There's a oneword.com in there. I think if it's an up and coming domainer, that doesn't make sense to spend that. So I'll skip that. And then the last one, continuing a theme, grillking.com. It sounds like an existing brand. I would once again check trademarks on that one, which I actually thought, as I was looking at these names, the ones where I was like, wow, you should check the trademark because it sounds like a legitimate brand. And that's actually a good sign, but it's not a good investment if it actually is conflicting with a trademark. So do your homework. The Grill King, I would, I could see that selling for quite a lot of money. So I'd spend $500, up to $500 to invest in that, to sell it for 5 figures down the road, as long as there's no trademark conflict.
Yeah, that one really jumps out. Thanks, Bill. Brian, what are your thoughts?
Let's see. I really liked BigSister.com. I thought that was fantastic, especially with the Boys and Girls Club. I think there's a lot of the Big Sister, Big Brother programs out there. Yes, that's a fantastic domain, and looks like that'll probably sell somewhere around $1,000, but definitely worth a lot more than that. I really liked AdventureSports.com. Again, fantastic brand, but also really that has a lot of different uses there. So adventuresports.com, really liked that one. And then one I would encourage people to try and stay away from, in my opinion, would just be cafe.net. You know, people might be excited about the, the 33,000, Esterbot value, but I've just had a really, really tough time selling, one word .nets for clients. And I feel like that extension has really taken a hit, especially with a lot of the new GTLDs. So, it might get some popular, a lot of people bidding on it, but I would just say be leery of that one long term.
Good point. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very thoughtful. All right, Drew, how about you?
So I agree with Brian's sentiment overall on .nets. I think that they've been the biggest victim of the new GTLD rollout. It's just 1,000, I've said it before, but 1,000 new domain extensions competing for second place, which is where, .net has always tried to compete. So I think that does harm .net values. That being said, it had been a few years since we had closed any material .net sales. And in the last 6 months, we've closed a number of very material .net sales, not on par with what we were selling them 4, 5, 6 years ago, but still significant. We had 2 6-figure sales in .nets, and quite a number being, somewhere in the 5 to 10 range of 5-figure .net sales. And most of those were lead gen stuff, not, brands. But I personally, as a complete addict of coffee and caffeine, I really like cafe.net. I just, there's been so much goodwill built around the word cafe, not just because of, it's coffee in every Latin-speaking country in the world. It's, a place where people come together to meet, and using that meaning of the word, there's been a lot of brands that have been created that use something cafe, because it's creating a meeting point or creating a nucleus, where people come together around. And I think the cafe still expresses that. And it's just so rare that a word of that magnitude in any extension comes available, any extension that has any value whatsoever. Let me know when cafe.horse comes up. And so I like it. I agree that, you don't want to pay $33,000 for that name, but, grand or two, I'd be on that name, I'd be all over it. I like it. It doesn't mean it's a smart buy, but I do like that name. We haven't touched on Kick. So, that's kind of the elephant in the room here. Amazing domain. I am skeptical about whether or not it actually goes to auction and completes, but let's see. If it does, I assure you I'll be in the running.
In the running?
Probably, yeah, pun intended. I think it's probably one of the best, with the exception of the NamesCon auction on NameJet, I think it's one of the best oneword.coms to hit auction in years, or at least in my recent memory, which is tainted. In my eyes, if we owned kick.com, I'm probably pricing that name at like $350,000 to $500,000. You'd be pretty hard pressed to get that name out of my cold dead hands at less than $350,000. And I might even go more than that, because what I'm seeing is that the name probably has a lot of traffic. It's been tied up and untouchable for a very long time. It's pretty much a clean slate, and it's got a very big overture score. So I love this name. And it's a 4-letter word, which is the holy grail of branding. If there was like one common theme among, 80% of the buyers that come in our door asking us to help them with a name, it's whether it's a specific name that they want or they're just looking for a brand. It's like, we want a 4-letter word that's easy to pronounce and spell, right? And kick is, it's right there.
And the second holy grail of branding is something that's a verb and a noun. Kick.
Yeah.
And on top of that, here is a domain in an auction, in a marketplace auction that end users don't even typically know about. So here's your opportunity to, if you're an end user and you do know about this, here's your opportunity to buy a name at probably a very depressed price compared to if it ends up in the hands of somebody that actually really knows its true value.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I'm going to take this opportunity to exploit that comment. And very, very recently, I was told about 2 huge end users, 2 of the biggest companies in the world. One of them high tech, one of them old tech. And I won't mention their names, but this is true. This really, really, really exists. Literally one of the largest companies in the world regularly watches DomainSherpa and actively bids for domain names at least in NameJet. No, sorry, Dropcatch. I don't know if they mentioned NameJet actually, but I know that they do actively bid on Dropcatch. So I think, and I've watched a few auctions in the last year on GoDaddy where I thought, I've got a pretty good feeling for the market. I know who the major players are that would be buying a name like this, and this is just selling way too high above that mark for it to be an investor. And most of the time, those names end up under privacy. We don't, sometimes they get used, most of the time they don't. And so we don't find out who the buyer is. But I'm quite sure, which is a great, development. But I think that there are a handful of end users that are now penetrating these, traditionally domain investor only auctions and marketplaces.
And not only do their, perception of domain values need to evolve to get to that point for end users, but also their acquisition process. Like Bill, we were talking about earlier, that part of the process, what's available, okay, what do we want from what's available within our budget and our preferences? But also the buying process is usually you pick the domain, the lawyers clear it, then you get approval. Whereas this, it's like an auction, you have to just get approved to a certain amount. See if you get it or not.
I will clarify that statement that I don't think they're buying speculatively. I could be wrong, but my understanding is that they're buying defensively. So they're buying names that expired, that were previously on their radar as potentially infringing names or somehow defensive. But it's mostly defensive purchasing, not speculative acquisition. Okay. Oh, we're getting this name at domain investor prices, so let's buy it. I don't think that's what's happening.
They're being smart. They're being
totally.
Very smart to do that. It doesn't happen very often, but I like it. I mean, I don't like it if I'm also chasing that name for somebody else, but hopefully it's the same client.
Yeah, and who said evolve or die? If we're gonna misquote everything, let's get that one right.
But that's exactly right. That's markets are intelligent. Markets are the highest intelligence because markets, by definition, it's cumulative intelligence. Everybody is speaking their opinion by either buying or not buying, by making an offer or not making an offer, and cumulatively, you create an incredibly efficient and smart entity, if you will. And so markets are always rational. And when they seem irrational, it's because the way you're evaluating it is wrong. So it's natural. Because you and I can sit here and say, oh, that's smart that they're now participating in these auctions, it should be a given assumption that they eventually would, because like you just said, evolve or die. If the market isn't evolving, it's dying. And so if this wasn't happening, if there wasn't evolution happening in the space, it'd be time to get out.
Well, I really appreciate that we have 3 brokers here whose time is so incredibly valuable, and each of you would dedicate your time to helping this whole market evolve. That's really, really a huge statement about how fun and interesting, but also how really great-hearted the domain industry is. You're good people.
I'm only doing it because I want one of those stars on, the Hollywood billboard.
Oh, we didn't tell you we're doing that in Portugal. We're going to do that at NamesCon in the sand. Okay, I'll bring the little star mold and a stick to write your name. Okay. You two, both Bill and Brian, you're in. I will send you a picture of your star in the sand. What's going on? Shout outs. This was a long show and I appreciate your time. Bill, what's happening? Any domains you have under brokerage? Anything you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I'm going to be attending a conference in Toronto end of May called Collision, which is being held in different cities around the world. It's billed as the fastest growing tech conference in the world. I've been to the version in Vegas 4 years ago, and I'll be there networking and running a startup naming contest, which we did 4 years ago, which is fun. Which will be on social media, and it's just kind of to celebrate good startup names and good startup, well, particularly the names and the domain names as well, the good startup names, just to get some education and spread the word about and celebrate people that choose good names for their startups. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks.
That sounds really cool. I'll watch for that. I want to see that. Nice. Good luck and have fun. Brian, how about you? What's going on at Grit Brokerage?
Yeah, so I want to give a shout out for 2 domains we've got under brokerage right now. The first one is likes.com, likes.com, and pretty much the single driving force behind all social media, right? What is it? I think Instagram said they're trying to get away from it, but just a total mistake. I mean, it drives social media as likes. And then the other one is instincts.com. So those are 2 that we're working on right now.
That's a big deal. Congrats for getting those under brokerage.
Sorry, singular or plural? Instinct?
Instincts, plural.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yep. I like it. Yeah, very nice. Drew, what's going on?
Too much. Same old same. We've got a lot of great names for sale. It's been a little bit slower the last couple of months, but this month, the last, let's say 2 weeks, it's really picked up. I can say that looks like we sold wallstreet.com. It's in escrow now. Looks like we sold bloom.com. It's in escrow now. Looks like we sold there's another big one that we just sold. I don't know. It's not on the top of my head at the moment. But there's been a number of sales, and then also a number of very big, one extremely large acquisition we've made. So it's the market seems to be heating up. There's been some great activity in the last couple of weeks, I always say it's we've got until July 1st, and then the market's going to slow down for 90 days. So it's a full sprint from here on till July 1st. If you've got a top 1% name that you want to sell, we'd love to help you sell it. That's it. That's all I got.
Nice. Good for you. Well, I don't have a ton going on that I want to share right now, but I will say, I'm surprised you didn't say this, Drew. Media Options touches a lot of domain names, and I love postcard.com. We're brokering that. That is one of my top favorite names we've ever brokered. it just takes me away.
Business in a box, baby. Gotta love those.
Big time. Everybody instantly knows what it is and has so many feelings associated with it. Still cuts it at the 8-letter mark. But I'm not personally brokering it. I have no reason to be shouting this out except that I want to go there.
A little known fact, my great grandfather was a pioneering British postcard entrepreneur. And, unfortunately the family business did not get passed down. But if I was in the postcard business, or as my great grandfather was, that would be the domain name I'd be going after for sure.
Wow. Well, you got the entrepreneurship gene for sure. So,
Bill, I think you got to step up and buy this just as a tribute to your grandfather. We'll give you a good deal. You want a payment plan?
Not yet. You didn't make your best and final offer.
ABC.
Well, I have a project now. I got to go buy some sand molds for our award ceremony on the beach. I'm sorry. I know I've asked you, but I don't remember. Who is going to NamesCon Portugal? No, both you guys know.
That's it. All right.
This year, nope.
All right. Well, you tell us how the Toronto conference is. Brian, I know that we will be seeing you again soon on Sherpa and off. And thank you all for joining us today. We'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
That's great. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, guys. Sorry for